Well, we're really going to look behind the news on a couple of issues today. One of the things that's happening, particularly amongst the Democrats, is the idea of an amendment to the Constitution, probably through a constitutional convention, to change the Electoral College of the United States, which has undergone two major changes since it was first initiated. Still is a good system, because most people don't understand that, and they advocate it being changed. But it is part of the checks and balances, originally within the executive branch, and particularly between the states and the federal government. But it's been changed and altered. Now, the final stage of doing away with it completely is this popular vote issue for the presidency of the United States. Just to give you an idea of what is behind this and has been for a long time, this is from my personal library. And this is a book that I got, a booklet actually, when I used to infiltrate Marxist organizations in the city of Seattle back in the early 1960s. It is the political resolution adopted by the 16th National Convention of the Communist Party of the United States, February 9-12, 1957. This is what they have to say in point E of their resolutions of what they wanted the Communist Party members to work for. Abolition of the Electoral College. In other words, do away with it completely. And the election of the president by direct popular vote. What would happen if this occurred would be there would be no checks and balances between the states and the federal government, or at least would wipe out one of those things in the Constitution that does that. It would make the president the idea that he is mandated by the people to do certain things, regardless of the Constitution. The one thing for sure that it would do, regardless of arguments about anything else, and that is that the voters of California, Florida, New York, Pennsylvania, and a couple of other states would elect the president of the United States. And Idaho and Montana, North and South Dakota, Wyoming, Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, New Mexico, a number of other states, well, they could take a walk, Alaska too, because they wouldn't elect the president of the United States. You would be taxed for all those things that the president would want to do, but the benefits of that tax would go to those states that elect or re-elect the president. Popular election of a president, a very dangerous thing. One of the things that we've noticed from this past week is that the bankers, the world bankers, are going to be holding up their own depositors. It used to be that the depositors were held up by robbers who would come into the bank, hold up the bank. But now it's the bank who's going to be robbing the depositors. And so the big banks are holding up the little banks, and then the little banks will hold up the Cypriot depositors in their banking accounts. What's happening is that in order to bail out the failed economy of Cyprus, they've decided, now the figures vary, but from what we can see from the Wall Street Journal this morning, is that anybody that has 100,000 euros in their account will be taxed at 9.9%. In other words, almost 10% of their account will disappear, just like that, into the coffers of the world bankers. And then, too, they say that the people who have less money than 100,000 euros, they will be taxed only 6.75%. In other words, nearly 7% of their deposit will disappear. Now, I don't know how much you made on any of your deposits, your CDs or your savings accounts or your checking accounts that may give you some sort of a return. But certainly, you didn't get that kind of money last year. You didn't make any money, as a matter of fact, between the inflation and the taxes on the money that you actually made in interest. You came up with a negative purchase power over a certain amount of money. And now, in addition to that, they're going to take even more of it. What they're doing is they're robbing the frugal in order to save the country from those who are not frugal. Why not cut the benefits? Why not do things like that that are going to lessen the burden on those who are trying to do everything they can to save for their old age, to save and capitalize the economy in Cyprus and any other country, Spain, Greece, wherever. But finally, next to finally, the thing is that this might be a portend of things to come here in the United States if we keep going the way we are. Will they come down and arbitrarily make a law, which they're debating now in Cyprus, that they can confiscate 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 20% of all of our savings to make things work out for those who can't seem to save a nickel? It's possible. We've had gold confiscations before in our country. It's 4 times, as a matter of fact. The last time was under Franklin Delano Roosevelt. You can't hold gold anymore. Bring it on in. We need the gold, in the name of the Depression. Those things can happen. But finally, the thing that's involved in the Cypriot thing, like everything else in bailing out Europe, is the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. Ladies and gentlemen, that money, a lot of it comes from you and me. That money is U.S. Federal Reserve notes going to these areas to help bail them out. They're in trouble after all, so we're going to send them money. Why not keep it at home and have that money circulating at home to help our economy? No, we're going to bail out the world. One of the things that I saw in this newspaper, in the New York Times yesterday, is an advertisement, full page, in the New York, and it was building sustainable cities. And a number of speakers are talking about what we know as Agenda 21. And of course, Mayor Bloomberg of New York, who's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, and a number of other individuals who are members of the Council, particularly the 2 columnists from the New York Times, Friedman and Sorkin, are going to talk about sustainable cities. And also Petter Jensen, who is in the European Environmental Agency. So we're going to have a European come and tell the New Yorkers how to run their city. And so this is part of the agenda of the New World Order under the UN. And you see a number of individuals involved in it who are part of the Council on Foreign Relations, who have always promoted the United Nations and a New World Order. But it's one of those things that we continue to fight. It's just now they're getting bigger and bigger in their events, becoming more out in the open because they've got to fight the work that the John Birch Society has been doing for the last couple of years. We're winning, they're losing, they're trying to do everything they can to win. One of the things I wanted to point out to you is how definitions can change. I talked about inflation just a moment ago. This is a 1936 edition of a book that was for all the junior high schools in the United States. Thorndike Century Junior Dictionary. Let me read you the definition of inflation. And maybe what you ought to do right now is put this video on pause and go get your dictionary and see what your dictionary has to say about inflation. Inflation, the increase of a country, the increase of the currency of a country by issuing too much paper money. Let me read that again. The increase of the currency of a country by issuing too much paper money. You see, it hasn't got anything to do with wages going up and prices going up. That's the effect of issuing too much money. Here's another one, the Winston Simplified Dictionary for Schools in the 1930s. Inflate the currency. For instance, the third definition of inflate is to raise beyond reason. Catch that. To raise beyond reason as prices. Inflate the currency. To increase the amount of paper money in circulation without any addition to the gold or silver reserve, thus causing a rise in prices. Now, your dictionary might tell you it's an increase in wages and prices, or some nebulous definition that comes close, but not exactly to where the average school kid can understand what inflation is. That's one of those things that they've changed the definitions over the years, obfuscated them so you don't know what's really going on when they're talking about inflation. It's government's fault. Inflation is always, always, always government's fault. Or the Federal Reserve. Pretty much the same thing. A lot of people have asked us about the new Pope Francis. How does he set internationally, his politics and everything else? It appears that he has all the right moral issues. But let me explain how I judge politicians, because I have judged a few governors of the United States in this manner who have very good positions on abortion, they have good positions on homosexuality and on and on, and all the great moral issues of the day. But at the same time, they advocate the New World Order. They advocate and promote the United Nations and that sort of thing. If you say on one hand that you are a great moralist, on the other hand you say we've got to endorse and support and strengthen the United Nations, you have negated everything that you claim to have on the moral side, because the United Nations will ultimately tell us what our positions are. And the position of the United Nations is pro-abortion, pro-gun confiscation, pro-homosexuality, on and on and on and on. So don't tell me what you believe here if it contradicts what it says there. In that light, it will be interesting to see what happens with the hierarchy of the Catholic Church over the next few years. Until next week, we'll see you then.